Today we have a special guest who is actually in my neck of the woods, which doesn't happen as often as sometimes I would like. We've got Janis Isaman joining us from Calgary, Alberta. She is a movement specialist, and we are really looking forward to digging in a little bit of really, Janis, kind of how was your journey to getting to do that? What's the passion behind being a movement specialist? And first of all, Janis, what it even is a movement specialist? You gotta start there for some of us, okay?
Okay, we will start there. So I work with people who have physical pain in their body, and I am working on exercise, mechanical, and physical things to start. And so I use the title movement specialist. I also have a couple of different certifications in trauma therapy. So I can take that body pain all the way from here's a physical exercise that would look more like a PT to somebody who wants an active lifestyle, to somebody who recognizes that their pains are coming from their emotional capacities. So most of the time, what triggers somebody to come see me is that they have back pain, neck pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. I mean, you name it. And they most of the time have gone to see a massage therapist, a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, a doctor, etc. And what they generally find is that they're getting some relief from it, but then it kind of cycles and comes back. So they end up in my office to sort of figure out how to get rid of that system level pain, whether that's physical, emotional, etc. So that is it. That you don't typically meet other people who do this because it's kind of a job that I cobbled together. That title is one that I am legally allowed to use, but it isn't kind of a popular thing to do for a living. I ended up doing it because, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I had my own experience, and I should say experiences, where I needed what I offer and I couldn't find it. So that kind of initial catalyst moment, I was a university student, and I ended up with what we would now call runner's knee. So that is a painful condition actually caused by mechanics of the hip. However, at the time when I had it, that research that said, oh, you're feeling that pain in your knee, the root cause is your hip, that actually didn't exist. So that is thanks to our friends at the University of Calgary, who later came up with that information through clinical study. When I was going through my knee pain, I did exactly what I just shared with you, which is I went to sports medicine doctors, I went to physiotherapists, I went to a rolfer, I went to people that gave me crazy ideas, including an elder doctor who told me to take a rope and 2 rocks and stick them up somehow on my couch and then do quad movements with it. And I was like, this is nuts. And no. So I was not that old. I was still a teenager, and I just found myself in this loop of, I want to be more active. I wasn't a super active kid. I was artsy, creative, crafty, visually inclined, and not very athletic. And so searching for somebody that wasn't kind of putting me in a sports program or giving me crazy impractical solutions was really hard. And I went to a lot of different people and nothing kind of worked. And so that set off what became a lifelong curiosity, passion, and something with deeper and deeper and deeper levels. Like the body isn't just sort of apply this exercise, walk away, you're done for the rest of your life. So I subsequently, I actually went on to have a completely different career, but because this curiosity and this passion was inside me, I was in my spare time taking different certifications, and those include a whole set of different physical modalities. I also added holistic nutrition, I added trauma therapy, and somewhere in that story, I ended up making it my core career.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so walk me through the steps of you saying that you had a different career, because a lot of people, I think, have followed that path to entrepreneurism, where we start out somewhere else and then we end up somewhere else. But there's also a lot of people that are, still in the moment of time where they wish or think or pray or hope that they could do something different, but maybe they're stuck feeling like they can't, or stuck feeling like they couldn't give up the security. So I'm sure you had some of those same moments with yourself. So what was your
Yes.
career previous to this?
I worked in the media and I worked in the fashion media. I had a great job actually, and I really liked it. So I think that is actually worth saying, because I think quite often what drives people out of their career path is that they don't like it. I actually liked what I did for a living. I lived in Toronto. I lived in New York City. It was really quite an amazing career. So it was not an easy switch. It wasn't kind of the dream thing where it's like, okay, I'm just going to leave the whole life behind me and become an entrepreneur, and easy, away we go. I actually quit my job once, and I sort of laugh now because I just wasn't prepared to do it. So I quit. I was like, all right, I'm going to become a health professional. And I literally spent probably 6 to 8 months actually crying, processing everything that I had kind of bottled up and just sort of pushed through. And I was like, I can't do this. This is nuts. So I actually went back for another year. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a footing. So I think that, your timing is actually relevant in terms of when you actually leave that career, because if you're not ready, or if you have spent a whole bunch of time sort of repressing and pushing through. I mean, entrepreneurship actually really requires the entrepreneur to be in a healthy physical and emotional space, because obviously I am an entrepreneur and have been for a while. And, it's not this even, I'm always healthy, I'm always vital, but those moments when you're not actually really impact your business, you kind of can't push through it, because you are the helm of the ship, you are the emotional captain. And you don't really get that same work-life separation. You are your business is you. You don't get to shut the door at 7 p.m. on a Friday and not think about it again until Monday morning. That's not a thing.
Yeah, like balance is defined in a whole different way. And
Oh,
not
yeah.
that it's a bad thing, because I think you need to allow yourself, the space to have that creative mind, right? You hear the sayings that you need to get to be working on your business, not in your business. And so you have to, when you're going for a walk, you're kind of probably thinking about your business, or at least I am. That's when sometimes like revelations come to you, or even in your sleep, that's when the pieces come together. But I want to talk about that for a second, because quite often, so like I help people in my business through, I also train and develop people to come in and learn how to be an entrepreneur. And so there's this whole time frame where we're kind of shifting from, we call it the employee mindset to the business mindset, right? And when I first was hearing these, you think, well, it's almost like we're putting down employees, but it's really more that we're elevating the leadership within someone. We're elevating the emotional state. But it sounds weird at first. People will be like, why do you keep talking about personal growth, personal development? Why are you obsessed with that? Why are you reading all of these self-help books? Like, you've read one, you've read them all. But at the same time, I really do believe that personal journey is something that everyone should be on, right? Like, learning is a lifelong habit that we should all continue to keep and cultivate. But especially it really shows up in entrepreneurism, because you're leading people, you're leading a vision, you've got to do the work. But what that work looks like or starts like for someone might be crying for 7 months. I don't know if that's an alternative method, Janis. Like you quit your job, you're crying for 7 months. I mean, certainly you must have had thoughts where you're thinking, well, obviously I'm just not cut out to do this. Like, what am I doing? How were your friends and family reacting during this time frame? And how did you keep going?
I don't know that I thought that I wasn't cut out to do it. So actually, I will share that I grew up in an entrepreneur family. So to me, that whole way of thinking and structuring your life was inherent to my childhood. So I think that actually is important, because I didn't ever have those thoughts of, this isn't for me, I don't know what I'm doing, etc. I think when you grow up in an entrepreneurship family, because I see it in my own child, there are just so many little lessons about how you structure your life, how you manage your finances, how you actually even process your emotions, we didn't call it that when I was a kid, but you boundary your time to make sure that you have your vacations and your rest and your downtime. And those are just really inherent to that kind of family structure. So I had that inside me, and I never appreciated that when I was a kid or even at that time, but that actually was helpful. So I didn't kind of have to go through that whole piece. I knew it wasn't the right time, because when I'm basically processing a decade of like emotions that I hadn't had the time and the capacity to feel, because my job was so busy and I was doing all these compensatory things, because it was like, I don't have time, I'm super stressed, there's more work to be done, I've got to perform. I think that you have to actually tackle a bunch of those components, because if you don't do it before you start the business, you're going to have to do it when you start the business. I once was at a conference for my industry, and there was another person who was speaking about, and I love this metaphor, but she said, when you start a business, you are going to basically, take apart your house, and you're going to get to the basement, you're going to get to the sub basement, you're going to pull up that sub basement, you're going to discover a skeleton laying on the floor. And then you're going to have to figure out what to do with that skeleton. And then you kind of clear that out, and then you keep digging, and you realize that there's another sub basement in there, and there's probably another skeleton laying there. And I actually think I love it, because that actually is quite reflective of the process that I've had to go through. So I think you can't lead a company, you can't have that creative vision, you can't have balance, you can't enforce any of the kind of things that successful entrepreneurs do without doing that personal work. It just doesn't exist, because you don't have that team of people that are pulling you along. You don't have external goals. It's all coming from you. And so if you're not kind of emotionally healthy and balanced, and haven't dealt with the skeletons in that sub basement, it's going to come back and haunt you at the most inconvenient time. And that's really kind of what I was experiencing with I'm gonna quit my job, I'm gonna open my business. And then it was like, okay, I'm actually stuck, because I hadn't processed that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I was lucky in the sense that it came up before I had committed to a lease and starting the business, because I could pop back into the corporate world for another year and just kind of clean that up a bit and then proceed. But you don't want to be in a scenario where the skeletons are just coming up and out of the chimney when it's not a time of your choosing.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack in there, but a lot of people would almost see that as a failure, right? That they went through this time, they quit their job, and then, they didn't, skyrocket to this, some sort of, have 1 million followers on Facebook and be doing master classes. And sometimes that is viewed as a failure almost. But in fact, it's required for your success. So the idea of rising through is that those struggles are required. It's a foundation that you're building upon, instead of even something that, comes up, you got to get through it. But, it would have been better to avoid it in the first place. But in fact, those struggles are what create your pathway to success. Like you're saying, we have to continue to raise our emotional intelligence, our ability to empathize, our ability to vibrate at a different level. And the only way to do that is to really actually go through those steps. There's no quick method to get there. There's tools you can use to help you get there. There's tools you can get the work done with, but we still have to walk through that journey to get to our higher self. And that's something that we're always continuously, striving through. For me, it was like, when I first became an entrepreneur, I was super young, and nobody talked about this kind of stuff. My husband came from an entrepreneur family. So that was a real big blessing, because on the juxtaposition, my family didn't, right? So their family was very encouraging. Yes, you should do this. It's different types of conversations happening at the dinner table versus, oh my God, my child is definitely going to be homeless. This is crazy for them to do, right? And I was like 20 when we first started our business. We built that first business to a multi-million-dollar business. We did very well for ourselves, but there was lots of learning and struggle through that. So, I can understand that they were coming at it from a place of caring, but it brings to mind there's kind of a meme going around right now, or TikTok even, and it says the billionaire will never, look down on you for just getting started. The content creator will never look down on you for starting that first video. They will never look down on you for starting that first little business, when so many of the outside people will, because they just don't understand. Because the billionaire knows, the content creator with 1 million followers knows that they also started at step 1 too. They had to go through that process, and they had to suck, and they had to get better, and they had to do all those steps required, right? So that 7 months of crying sucked, but it was required.
Yeah.
You couldn't have just skipped it, at least in your journey. No one has to go through 7 months of crying to be successful. That's not what we're saying.
Nope.
But for Janis, it was required, right? She needed that so that she could get to where she was ultimately going and serving people. And I want to talk about a little bit, this idea of emotional pain. There's a book that one of my mentors brings up a lot. It's called No More Back Pain or something. I'm totally slaughtering it. I'll put it in the show notes. But my mentor, one of my mentors, Ray Higdon, talks about it. And it was one of the first books that he read that had the mind-body connection, where most people that have these physical ailments, in fact, it's an emotional manifestation. And he was experiencing, if I recall, it was tennis elbow really bad. It was like a year. He was in really bad pain. He went to all kinds of different therapies and stuff. And for some reason, he ended up reading this book. He read it, and then his pain was gone. And he didn't experience it anymore. And that's when he started realizing that there's that mind-body connection. And when I first started hearing about some of these things, it didn't seem real to me. But then I looked to some of the very successful people in our world, and what I find is that no matter what industry they're in or what type of business they have, they all have a consistency of talking about energy, vibration, emotional well-being, and the connection between mind, body, the connection between meditation, the connection between elevating and cleaning out our mental space to get to that next level in our physical world. So it's not something that's normal that people talk about or that people use as a therapy. So how did you arrive at that point?
I mean, actually, it probably started with the 7 months of crying, but when I went back to work for a year. Then I left that industry and haven't ever gone back. And then I opened a physical studio location. And, that's a great question, because I've never really thought about the parallels there. But the studio that I have, I work one-to-one with people, and it's a few hundred square feet. So I purposefully chose a space where it was private sessions that were actually private. So I'm not in a massage clinic. I'm not in a clinic setting of any kind. And first of all, that immediately changes the energy of connection. But what I noticed, and I was super unprepared for it, was that people would come to see me. We would be working on that physical pain, and out would come all of these really emotional stories and situations.
Right.
And I remember going to a therapist down the hall and saying, I don't know what to do with this. Like, do I put crystals in my bra to like ward off against it? And I would actually come home exhausted from the conversations.
Yeah.
So that led me on another lengthy search for, what do I do with this? And that's how I ended up in the trauma therapy world, because while trauma therapy doesn't sound related to what I do at all, trauma therapy is somatics. So that is exactly what you were just describing, where the mind and the body are one unit. So in our Western mindset, we've divided those. So when you want mental health help, you go to a therapist. When something's wrong with your body, you go to the doctor. But the pain channels inside your body are the same pain channels. So your body isn't saying, ooh, that's a physical pain, we're going to use this channel X. That's an emotional pain, we're going to use channel Y. That's not what happens. Pain is pain. And your nervous system is reading the entirety of everything that's going on around you. So to me now, today, I'm like, well, it's obvious why these stories would start to come out when we would kind of open up space in people's life and their bodies. That's exactly what happened to me. When I quit my job, I opened up that space in my life, and woo, out came all the emotions. So we don't often talk about it, but at the end of it, it doesn't matter what languaging you're using around it, because there are a lot of different ones. If the word vibrations doesn't resonate with you, cool. There's somatics. That seems somewhat more grounded. If that doesn't resonate with you, Tony Robbins has great languaging around this. He's somebody that I would definitely look to say. He started off with kind of very practical intellectual concepts. And as he has gone along in his career, he's got entire books about health. And it's no coincidence. That is not happening by accident. And it's not so that he can capitalize on the health market. It's because that's so inherent. All you have to do is look at him and you can tell that he's got strong health and emotional practices. So those things are really, I think that I went down that path because it was a way to serve clients. But guess who ended up doing all the work first? It was me. And it changed my business, and it changed my capacity to parent, and it changed how I structure my day. And it changed the voices in my head and my relationship to myself and the things that I think are necessary or what I say to myself.
Yeah, I love that because, you had this business idea and it was focused on physical pain, physical nature. And then through that discovery of actually treating people, you continuously had all this emotional stuff coming up. And instead of just ignoring it, you dug into it and you sought out ways to enhance what you were doing instead of just shoving it under the rug and ignoring it and continuing to just focus on the physical nature. And probably seeing success doing it, but limited success, right? You would hit that ceiling with people, but it's almost like the journey to get through that and being open enough to listen to what was going on allowed you to be able to help people on such a deeper level. And, certainly there's, like I was in a car accident. I have really bad neck pain, still every day. There's a physical part of it.
Yes.
But there's also probably emotional parts of it where it like latches on to each other almost. And so the ability that you had to be able to listen to your clients and to open yourself up to that information versus just saying, no, this is the way that I do business. This is the way that I know I can treat people. This is the only way, enabled you to open yourself up to become an even greater healer for people, which I think is really amazing. If someone is listening and they might not be able to come into your clinic, is there kind of like a couple steps that someone could go through with themselves, or a couple tips you could give someone of, hey, if you got this nagging pain, let's just open ourselves up. Maybe these are some little things that you could do to help yourself with it, to release that emotion attached to the pain, or to even identify, like, is that what's happening to me?
That's a good question. So I think that, again, I know that my voice doesn't resonate with everybody. I am going to attract and appeal to certain people. So I think step one is really starting to put yourself, and it's so easy now compared to what it used to be, but put yourself in a position where you're actually intaking messages on Instagram, on TikTok, on whatever platform that you actually really resonate with, and start it. If you're somebody who watches reels, watch some reels. If you're somebody who reads things, start to read the messages and really find somebody that you resonate with. I think within that, reading and taking in information is really different than doing. So I can read about fitness all day long. It does not make me a fit person. And so I think that actually that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing, especially in emotions and even the trauma world, is we're reading these things. We have these giant insights, but that's not actually it. You have to get in there and do the work, and it's the practices. And so step two is going to be to either contact that person, contact somebody that they trained, contact somebody with a similar kind of working style or technique in your community, because part of how you get to the next level is actually with another person. So usually the idea of practice is something like, oh, we can do that. I can totally gut that. I don't need to do that to get another practitioner. Most of the time that's untrue. So most of the time we need community, we need support, we need actually somebody else helping us with that. And so I actually really encourage, it doesn't need to be me, but there is somebody out there in your community, in your local area, on, some social media page. It could even be a digital connection, but you likely need somebody to kind of walk you through it. And I know you do this, I do this, but most of the time you're also going to be dealing with somebody who actually has experience with other people and their experiences. So some of the things that I often share with people, because they don't know, is that journey is not linear. It's never linear. We kind of spike up, we have this huge piece of improvement, and then there's inevitably a collapse and a fall. And you feel like what happens is people say, oh, I feel like I'm back at the beginning. I'm stuck. I've made no progress. That's totally normal. So just actually even knowing that practitioner has seen people go through these pieces and can say, hey, you got this, keep going, and help you redevelop that plan. So that's part of why I really encourage another practitioner. It's because quite often the second that we're not kind of flying high on the hormones of like, yeah, I'm winning, I've got this, we can easily fall off the wagon. And that practitioner likely has worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people, and has a really good sense of kind of what the whole path looks like from beginning to end. So I think just, step 1 and step 2 are kind of the same. Just start absorbing information, recognize that information is not the end of the journey. The insights are not actually doing the work. And then be willing to take the step of going to find the person in your community or online that you resonate with, that when they speak, you say, you're my people, you get it. And have that person kind of help you put together that plan.
I think that's great. Insights don't equal doing the work. So it's like the layers of awareness, right? First, you're aware of the problem. Then you're saying, okay, maybe I need to take this to the next level, and having that guide, that journey. I think you're exactly right. It's very similar to entrepreneurship. Is you start out and you're on a high, and then the next day you feel like you need to quit, and then the next day you feel like you're doing everything right, and maybe it might even be from hour to hour, not day to day.
Sure.
Where you feel like you're making progress, and then you're going to hit a wall, you're going to hit a struggle, and that is actually required for you again to get to that next level. You have to continue walking through it to be able to actually continuing to level up. It's not just, one and done, becoming aware and then moving on. It's going to be a continuous process that you go through with yourself. I think that's really insightful what you said there. And the added practitioner helping you through that, I think is really great. That's why coaches exist. Coaches in all different modalities are effective, because you need that person to help guide you through it. It's like, traveling somewhere without a map. You need some sort of guide.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know we were chatting that we both have children, and what I kind of compare it to is during the stay-at-home orders in the pandemic, that's the first child that I've ever taught is my own, and it didn't go that well. Turns out I'm not actually a great teacher. But I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm not familiar with the curriculum. I'm not familiar with kind of some of the pushback to the work. Whereas when my child goes to school, that teacher not only has 20 to 30 children in their class right now, but they had 20 to 30 different children last year and the year before. And so what they're seeing with my child is, we've seen this behavior before. We know what's happening. We know the curriculum. I can guide you through it. And in my lifetime, I will teach one child. So if you're trying to do that yourself, you are trying to teach yourself as one child, versus when you get a practitioner, you are now working with somebody who actually has that body of experience, and they can just cut through it a lot faster.
Yeah, they can cut through it. As a homeschooler, I will say that you can teach your child, but that's a whole different conversation. But I will say that my facilitator is super valuable. You still need those guides. You still need other parents that have gone through it to help you figure it out, because exactly, you're going to get to the end result so much faster if you have someone that can say, oh, that's totally normal, or hey, try this, or
Yes.
look at it this way, or offer a different perspective. That's going to cut out your time. That's how you compress timeframes. That's how, you know, even in the history of the world, right? How can we go from horse and buggy to, you know, flying objects, flying, you know, helicopters and planes in the sky, is because the collective intelligence is building on each other, right? We're not starting from scratch. We're starting from this next stage of knowingness, and then we can continue building on that. So it's the same in every modality, I imagine, right? So when you are working with someone, you're working in your office, and that's in Calgary. It's going to be in the show notes of where someone can go to actually connect with you. Are you also working with people online? Or?
Yes, absolutely. Like most practitioners, I had a full clinical practice online during the pandemic. So I always wanted to before, and it was just that gap of people didn't actually know, you know, do we go on Skype? And I'm like, no, there's this thing called Zoom. And then all of a sudden on like March 27th, 2020, everybody knew how to use Zoom all of a sudden. So that was actually for me and my business, that was a huge technological gift that everybody kind of learned one technology en masse all over the world.
Yes,
and so I had and have had clients as far away as I think Australia is actually the farthest, but lots of US based clients, lots within Canada. And, you know, I still have a component of my practice that is online and always will be. And then I have my studio practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic is a perfect example of reacting to situation and seeing the blessing and actually rising through a situation. The pandemic moved so many people's businesses forward in a lot of different virtual ways, like yours, like mine. I couldn't do what I do on a daily basis the way that I do. I work with people across North America now. It's been such a blessing and a gift to my family. But who would have imagined that a global pandemic would be a blessing, right?
Yeah.
Who would think that? And of course, for, you know, a lot of people in a lot of different situations, it still was a very difficult time. But it's a really good example of how we can, two people are experiencing the same thing and end up at very different results, right? And how we're reacting to a situation plays such a big part in where we actually end up. And I love that. So where can someone like find you if they want to connect with your virtual content, or if they want to maybe even visit you in Calgary? What's the best place to find you?
My business name is My Body Couture, which is 3 words: my, M-Y, body, B-O-D-Y, couture, C-O-U-T-U-R-E. So the best kind of entry point to find out a little bit more is my website, but I am active on social media sites. I would say that my website is probably a bit more reflective of the studio experience, but you're certainly welcome to follow any of my pages and to engage with me in any way there, including through direct message.
That's awesome. I love that. And so like right now, what would you say, Janis, is kind of the biggest struggle that you're choosing to walk through right now that you're learning from in your business and in your personal life even?
I think that during the pandemic, there was kind of a couple of different things going on, including the fact that my business was zoned to be shut down a number of times. And so I actually experienced physical burnout. I overworked, and I overworked for a bunch of different reasons, but you know, I don't relate to the people who are making sourdough. That sounds lovely.
I know. I was like, how did you have time to do that?
Yeah, totally. So, and then my child had some health issues himself during the pandemic. And so coming out on the other side, it's really an exercise in creating different habits and opportunities. And I do work with different clinicians myself on how can I be a sustainable entrepreneur in a new way. And there are always going to be things that arise that are out of our control. I clearly did not plan the pandemic. I did not execute the pandemic.
You didn't plan the pandemic?
It wasn't me, guys.
Okay.
And maybe that's even a bit more on the extreme end of things that can happen. But there's a lot of entrepreneur families who can relate to different health crises or different things that happen to somebody that's completely outside of our control. So really learning that is another level of skill set in terms of how do I structure my life differently? How do I change some of the conversations in my head? How do I work with the reality of that event has happened and the impact that it had? And what are the new skills and techniques and strategies that I can use going forward to try to mitigate that? So it's kind of another level of entrepreneurship again, where I'm always learning, I'm always experiencing new things. It's not kind of, I love that the internet says it takes 21 days to create that habit and just go from there. But, it hasn't been that way in my life. There's always the ups and the downs and the successes and the hardships. And so it's taking that collective period of 3 years in our lives and like, okay, how do I shift this? How do I grow from this? How do I move forward from this? And actually, you know what? I would say the biggest thing that I think is a gift from it is it's almost like starting fresh. So what am I keeping in terms of ambition and goals and things that I still want to do? What can I just say, I did that, or I wanted to do that. I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's like that fresh start, which is actually kind of awesome.
Yeah. What's been a big change that you've actually implemented?
I would say actually I've worked with a practitioner who has me doing she calls it pacing and alternating. And that actually comes from the medical model. So it is sustaining action, even when I'm tired or feel like I'm just burnt out and over it. So I think before I would kind of take on these big projects and hack them up, but always be productive. And I hit a point where I was like, okay, my body and my brain are, I'm exhausted. I have a high needs caregiving situation. I have a business that I need to rebuild. So how do we actually step into that? And using these strategies called pacing and alternating has actually been really helpful. And I'm about to using a different clinician. We're actually going to reshape some of, I did that for a year and now it's time to make another shift in that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Pacing and alternating. Okay, so what I'm hearing is maybe it's kind of like the idea of even in your business, continuing a level of activity that's sustainable and defining what that looks like rather than sometimes what entrepreneurs do. And a lot of entrepreneurs like myself have ADHD too. So we'll go like super high activity and then whoo, you just crash, right? I can do all the things. I can say yes to all the things. I want to do all the things. And then you like, oh, I can do no things.
Yes.
So the balance between, and even on a daily basis, I think this is something that I see people struggle with over and over and over is maintaining some level of activity even when you don't want to. So one of my coaches taught me something called minimum daily standard. So picking something, a daily standard of activity in your business or your personal life or your fitness life or whatever that is, that you are going to maintain even on your worst days. It's super small. You don't have to set a big goal. It might be, just something that's tiny. So my initial reaction to it previously probably would have been like, it's so insignificant that what's the point of doing it? But
yes,
the insignificance, right? The continuity of saying it's so insignificant that, I'm going to do it every day, no matter what. And sometimes then that grows into other things. So 1 year for me, it looks like I set a fitness goal of I'm just going to do 5 minutes a day. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember telling someone about it and they laughed at me. 5 minutes. What's the point? I'm like, the point is that it's consistency. Yeah. And often once you get into the 5 minutes, you're like, well, this is feeling good. I can continue, and 5 minutes turns into 10 or 20 or 15 or an hour. But instead of not doing it and then not allowing yourself to step into that greater level of activity, you just end up not doing it at all. Right. So is that kind of what this is like?
Yeah. So pacing is going to be waking up in the morning, and actually there's multiple checkpoints through the day, but saying, okay, I can do 100% or 150% today. And then maybe maybe I'm stressed out, or maybe I have a bigger load from external forces today. And so I wake up tomorrow, or even reevaluate it this afternoon, and say, I'm not only just going to do one thing for my to-do list instead of 3.
Yeah.
Whereas when I have more energy, I'm going to do 3 or 5, or, you know, like you said, maybe extend that workout. But that basic minimum is I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to check in, and I'm not going to push past it. And then alternating is that we have energy, we have cognitive, we have emotional, we have physical. So I think everybody can relate to this, and we actually do this, even if we don't know we're doing it. But if you were to go right now and run a marathon, you're not going to follow that up by going to the gym, because you're like, my physical energy is cooked. You might follow it by sitting and reading a book. So one of those is really physical. One of those is quite cognitive. So the alternating is where you actually flip-flop, so that you can actually be moving forward on different parts without kind of coming into that burnout in any part. So pacing is actually really hard, because it actually requires checking in constantly. And I think that as entrepreneurs, that isn't something that a lot of us are good at. It's like, you know, there's kind of more of that overlay of like, let's optimize, let's be maximizers. And so to actually say, you know what, today I actually feel a bit cognitively tired. So today is not the day to start working through like 27 things for my to-do list. But where you have that strategy of what's your base minimum, maybe I can do 1.
I think that's such a good life lesson. That was really valuable, especially for entrepreneurs, but for anyone. And it builds that acceptance with yourself. I think a lot of entrepreneurs quit, I think, because they let themselves down. But what we're expecting of ourselves maybe isn't realistic, right? Because we think at least in North America, we have this hustle culture, right? Of just push through, just grind, stay up till 4 a.m., sleep under your desk, just keep going. Who are you to quit? Keep going. It's Sunday. Who cares? Just keep going, because it's your business. You just got to get to the goal. You just got to do it. Just be harder, be tougher, be stronger. And it doesn't actually work. Yes, you have to put work into your business. Yes, there's going to be sacrifice, but you need to choose what that sacrifice looks like and what it is going to be defined by as you. And honoring those cycles with yourself will actually, like we were kind of saying at the beginning, you're going to work on your business, not in your business. So there's tasks that need to happen, but there's a lot of mental energy that needs to go towards your business, of where you're working subconsciously, even on that vision, on that mentor, of that light bulb moment of where, oh my goodness, I know the piece that's going to fix this thing, and you can go to the next level. So I think, Janis, that's an amazing piece of advice for our listeners today. So I appreciate that so much. I'm excited for people to look at that. If they're kind of experienced, if you're listening and you're experiencing pain, if you're going through that, I mean, if you're of a certain age, you've got pain, but different people are going to have different levels of it. And, you know, actually Tony Robbins does a piece where we're talking about not only why is it that so many people at a certain age start having pain? Why is it that so many people of a certain age start having physical illnesses, autoimmunes and stuff? Is not necessarily that our body is worn out because of age, but because of the accumulation of all the emotional traumas and triggers for it that we haven't worked on. So I think if you are experiencing anything like that, there's definitely some connection there. There's lots of proven results, and someone like Janis can help you actually figure it out and break through to the next level, and help you with that journey of healing for yourself, so that you can enjoy your life and be as productive as you need to be, and that you can show up for yourself in a way that's honoring, in a way that is really allowing you to do the things that you want to do in your life, and not having that barrier of physical pain. So I appreciate that.
There is absolutely nobody who can be their most productive, creative, vital self when experiencing pain. And that statement is not to shame people who have pain. It is just that it takes a lot of very basic physical energy to have it. And so if you think about a computer with too many programs on it, that the fan is running super high, you can hear that. That's basically what your body is doing if you have that physical pain. If it is a chronic condition that is unsolvable, then usually you have to kind of adapt your life to it. But assuming that most of the audience is in the phase where they want to be entrepreneurs and they want to have that full vital life, just having back pain or sciatica, or your neck is constantly sore, that is, you're running that computer fan on high. So there are solutions to help you chip away at that, to reduce it, and that'll give you extra space and creativity and capacity to actually run your business.
Yeah, it's so true. Or to be a better parent or a better partner.
Yes, all the things.
Right? All
Yes.
the things. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us today. I enjoyed it. I learned a ton. And I'm sure our listeners did too. So I'll include for the people listening, I'll include where you can find her in the show notes. I'll include that book I mentioned. But we would love to hear your feedback. If you found this podcast helpful, the best way you can support the show is if you just share it with someone. You can share it with someone and hopefully they get benefit out of it as well. And they can continue on their health journey and become better. And they can continue to rise through and ultimately reach their ultimate self, their ultimate level of success, which is, I think, the goal of our human existence. But you might not agree, but my show. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Janis, for joining us. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening. It's always an honor to have you spend some time with us. If you found this podcast of Rising Through valuable, please like, follow, and share it with someone that you think could benefit from it. That's the best way to give us the kudos, our guests the kudos, and it means a ton to us. If you have been thinking that maybe you want to connect further with me, maybe about the business that I'm in or anything in general, just please follow the links in the show notes and I would love to get connected to you.